Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Preimesberger, editor of eWEEK, and thanks for joining us for another eWEEK eSpeak segment. Our special guest today is Zeus Kerravala, our intrepid analyst for networking and systems type topics. And Zeus, good to have you again on eSpeaks.
Hey, thanks, Chris. And I guess you could say we're getting to be regular with Z Speaks on eSpeaks, huh?
We're going to have a separate new brand for you there, I
Yeah,
think.
I'll go get the domain name.
So, Zeus, there's been a lot of news in the networking world just the last week or so involving Cisco systems, NVIDIA, and other companies, and the combination of both of those. Can you kind of give us a rundown on the highlights?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, Chris, is just the overall rise in the value of network, and I'll talk about that later. But first, I'll get into some of the specific news. Late last week, Cisco announced its quarterly earnings. We actually wrote about that on eWeek, and by and large, it was a pretty solid quarter, right? The business did show it was transitioning largely to software. Margins were up. In fact, the margins for Cisco were the strongest I've seen in a long time. And this is a company where everybody thought the network would be commoditized, right? I remember back all the way to 2000, 2001, people were saying the network's going to be a commodity, the network's going to be a commodity, and Cisco um, uh, margins we get crushed. And I think the importance of that for the buyer is that I fundamentally believe nothing in the world is really a commodity, even bottles of water. People pay a premium for Fiji and Voss and things like that, right? So if you can add differentiation to your product, people will pay a premium for it because it does more. And I think Cisco's, when you look at what they're doing with intent-based networking and the integrated security and a lot of the automation, you can make an argument that the end-to-end Cisco network actually does more than trying to cobble one together from piece parts. And other vendors have tried to model that. So I think from a Cisco perspective, the strength it showed in the quarter, particularly in the areas of security, and even on the services side, because that's leading a lot of these larger deals for Cisco, was important for the industry. And Cisco's been a bellwether for tech spending for decades. And I think from an industry perspective, I know Cisco's got a lot of competitors out there that want to see the company fail. But if Cisco were to do poorly, that would be an indicator for the entire industry that things are taking a downturn. And I think that since they were strong, they're usually a leading indicator of things. And I think that's an important thing for the industry. Another interesting event last week was NVIDIA. Their CEO did a keynote for its virtual GTC. Now, GTC, GPU Technology Conference, is actually, it used to be a geeky show for gamers. It's now I think of it as the world's largest AI show. It's largely pivoted to that. And there's a lot of stuff that has to work in order for AI to work in a company. One of the foundational components, of course, is accelerated computing. So this is GPU-enabled servers that do things at a speed that's much faster than you can do with CPUs. Now, Jensen made an interesting comment. Jensen Huang, their CEO, made an interesting comment during his keynote about how the data center has become the new computer. And what he meant by that was that when you think of an old computer or a server, it was this box that you had, right, Chris? And it had storage and processor and memory and all these things kind of built into it. And so you deployed it on a server one for app one, server two for app two. Now, over time, what we've done is we've extracted things out of there, right? We've extracted storage, we've extracted memory, NVMe is coming, we've extracted GPUs. In fact, if you look at the biggest NVIDIA GPU, it's actually in 8 GPUs that are tied together with a high-speed network. And so all these things are now tied together with a high-speed network. And so that's why NVIDIA bought Cumulus and bought Mellanox, because they need that high-speed network to connect all these things that make up accelerated computing. And so his comment of the data center is the new computer, actually, you could take that one step further and say the network is, because all of those subcomponents, GPUs, those all reside in pools now. And so the network has then become the connectivity tissue. I hate that term, by the way, but that's the best one, the connectivity fabric for all those components. And if you look at the combination of what Jensen said and Cisco's quarter, I think what we're seeing, Chris, is a definite rise in network value. I think this shift was happening anyways. Whenever I talk to companies about their digital transformation plans, the ones that go badly are the ones because the network hadn't been upgraded, right? You see companies putting in VR headsets in order to people to buy furniture. You see people putting in mobile apps in store. Well, if the Wi-Fi is not ready, that you see that perform poorly. And so the network's value was already transitioning. And as a former IT person, I can tell you that the network rarely gets a seat at the decision-making table. Nobody really understands it, right? It's what you see behind me. It's the guys in the basement that really nobody knows what they do. And so I think this change in network value is happening, and what COVID-19 did was it ushered it in. And so for companies that are largely having people work from home, using video, using cloud services, if you have any weakness anywhere in the network, right, that's going to be exposed. And that's why when you read a lot of the trends on eWEEK and other sites, it's SD-WAN evolution, it's Wi-Fi 6, it's 5G, right? All of the building blocks of digital transformation and work from home are all network centric. And again, I think if you look at the combination of what Cisco said and what NVIDIA said and the combination of the two, it points to the network being more important. In fact, more important than ever. And you could argue that companies that don't invest in the network as they come out of COVID won't have the right infrastructure in place.
Yeah. Boy, this is back to the future. I remember in the 80s when Scott McNealy at Sun Microsystems was saying the network is the computer. And then also when you're mentioning, data centers as the new servers, that takes me back to 2012. I went up to visit Facebook's brand new data center up in Prineville, Oregon. They had two of them side by side, and they're huge. Each one is like 3 times the size of a Walmart. And each one of those, it's an app. One of them was just for graphics and images, and another one was for the app. It's like these huge buildings are servers, and that was a while back. Now it's evolved even more, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, and Facebook largely builds their own stuff for competitive advantage. But you think about what's happening to the world of applications. Applications themselves are being decomposed. Right, you talk to an app developer now, you don't sit down and code away and build an app from scratch. You go grab a piece of an app from this cloud, a piece of an app from this cloud. You go grab location info from your wireless operator. You go grab identity information from Facebook.
It's called it's called composable development. And that's the thing. That's what's going on.
And so again, think about the role the network plays in there. And one of the challenges that companies have is app developers don't really understand networking. Right. So in fact, if you talk to a developer and I don't want to pick on developers too much, but when they draw their UI on the screen and they do all the stuff, they connect everything with a straight line. And that straight line's the network. And it doesn't matter if it's the gigabit network they're working on or the low speed wireless LAN that connects branches or broadband to somebody's home. And so if app developers aren't going to become more network fluent, the networks need to become more application fluent. And that's where a lot of the work being done in AI ops and intent-based networking and things like that become important, because it's actually helping the network adjust to application anomalies versus having to rewrite the apps.
Right. Zeus, I love the way you're able to put these components together and come out with a cogent analysis of these things. The disparate parts of IT and the systems involved, and you're looking at the big picture and describing it very well to us. So I want to thank you for that. I really appreciate your expertise.
Oh yeah, thanks, Chris. And there's a big shift going on here, right? And so for people watching this video, they really need to start looking at their network and making the right investments, because there's a lot of innovation. There's probably more innovation in networking happening now than I've seen in my career. And again, we're in sort of a down period because of COVID, but when we come out of this, the companies that have the right strategy can step on the gas and really go.
All right. Zeus Kerravala, thank you very much for being on eSpeaks again. Thank you.
Always a pleasure, Chris.
Okay. And everybody out there watching, have a great rest of your eWEEK. Thanks for joining us on eWEEK eSpeaks. Go to eWEEK.com to hear more conversations with IT thought leaders.